Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 52 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto. And today we're going to begin the 19th chapter of the third canto. First of all, our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschitya Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchkalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha, Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, yes, let us begin the 19th chapter of the third canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, which is titled The Killing of the Demon Hiranyaksha. There are 38 verses in this chapter. We have divided them into 4 sections as follows. From verse 1 to verse 26, we call this Lord Varaha kills Hiranyaksha. From verse 1 to verse 26, Lord Varaha kills Hiranyaksha. Second section, from verse 27 to verse 30, Brahma and the demigods offer prayers to Lord Varaha. 27 to 30, Brahma and the demigods offer prayers to Lord Varaha. Then third section, verse 31 to verse 36, glorification of the Supreme Lord. Verse 31 to verse 36, glorification of the Supreme Lord. And then finally, the fourth section, verse 37 and verse 38, the benefits of hearing this pastime. Right, so first section is verse 1 to verse 26. It's very unusual to have such a long first section. Usually it's a couple of verses, 2 or 3 verses, but this is 26 verses. Lord Varaha kills Hiranyaksha. So yes, of course it's 26 verses, so we have to just read the verses first. Verse 1, Sri Maitreya said, after hearing the words of Brahma, the Creator, which were free from all sinful purposes and as sweet as nectar, the Lord heartily laughed and accepted his prayer with a glance laden with love. And verse 2, the Lord, who had appeared from the nostril of Brahma, sprang and aimed his mace at the chin of his enemy, the Hiranyaksha demon, who was stalking fearlessly before him. Verse 3, struck by the demon's mace, however, the Lord's mace slipped from his hand and looked splendid as it fell down whirling. This was miraculous, for the mace was blazing wonderfully. Verse 4, let's just write verse 4. Even though the demon had an excellent opportunity to strike his unarmed foe without abstraction. He respected the law of single combat, thereby kindling the fury of the Supreme Lord. Verse 5, as the Lord's mace fell to the ground, and a cry of alarm arose from the witnessing crowd of gods and rishis, the personality of Godhead acknowledged the demon's love of righteousness, and therefore invoked his Sudarshan discus, Sudarshan chakra. Verse 6, as the discus began to revolve in the Lord's hands, and the Lord contended at close quarters with the chief of his Vaikuntha attendants, who had been born as Hiranyaksha, a vile son of Diti, there issued from every direction strange expressions uttered by those who were witnessing from airplanes. They had no knowledge of the Lord's reality, and they cried, "May victory attend you! Pray dispatch him! Play no more with him!" Verse 7, when the demon saw the personality of Godhead, who had eyes just like lotus petals, standing in position before him, armed with his Sudarshan discus, his senses were overpowered by indignation. He began to hiss like a serpent, and he bit his lip in great resentment. Verse 8, the demon, who had fearful tusks, stared at the personality of Godhead as though to burn him. Springing into the air, he aimed his mace at the Lord, exclaiming at the same time, "You are slain!" Verse 9, O saintly Vidura, while his enemy looked on, the Lord, in his boar form, the enjoyer of all sacrificial offerings, playfully knocked down the mace with his left foot, even as it came upon him with the force of a tempest. Tempest means great storm. Verse 10, the Lord then said, "Take up your weapon and try again, eager as you are to conquer me." Challenged in these words, the demon aimed his mace at the Lord and once more loudly roared. Verse 11, when the Lord saw the mace flying toward him, he stood firmly where he was and caught it with the same ease as Garuda, the king of birds, would seize a serpent. 12. His valor thus frustrated, the great demon felt humiliated and was put out of countenance. He was reluctant to take back the mace when it was offered by the personality of Godhead. Oh, Krishna, feeling embarrassed. Right, verse 13. He now took a trident, which was as rapacious as a flaming fire, and hurled it against the Lord, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, even as one would use penance for a malevolent purpose against a holy Brahmin. Verse 14, hurled by the mighty demon with all his strength, the flying trident shone brightly in the sky. The personality of Godhead, however, tore it to pieces with his discus Sudarshan, which had a sharp-edged rim, even as Indra cut off a wing of Garuda. 15. The demon was enraged when his trident was cut to pieces by the discus of the personality of Godhead. He therefore advanced toward the Lord and, roaring aloud, struck his hard fist against the Lord's broad chest, which bore the mark of Srivatsa. Then he went out of sight. Verse 16. Hit in this manner by the demon, O Vidura, the Lord, who had appeared as the first boar, did not feel the least quaking in any part of his body, any more than an elephant would when struck with a wreath of flowers. Verse 17. The demon, however, employed many conjuring tricks against the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of Yogamaya. At the sight of this, the people were filled with alarm and thought that the dissolution of the universe was near. Verse 18. Fierce winds began to blow from all directions, spreading darkness occasioned by dust and hailstorms. Stones came in volleys from every corner, as if thrown by machine guns. Verse 19. The luminaries in outer space disappeared due to the skies being overcast with masses of clouds, which were accompanied by lightning and thunder. The sky rained pus, hair, blood, stool, urine, and bones. Inauspicious, extremely inauspicious omens. Verse 20, O sinless Vidura, mountains discharged weapons of various kinds, and naked demonesses, armed with tridents, appeared with their hair hanging loose. Verse 21. Cruel and savage slogans were uttered by hosts of ruffian dakshas and rakshasas, who all either marched on foot or rode on horses, elephants, or chariots. Verse 22. The Lord, the personal enjoyer of all sacrifices, now discharged his beloved Sudarshan, which was capable of dispersing the magical forces displayed by the demon. Verse 23. At that very moment, a shudder suddenly ran through the heart of Diti. Shudder means like shivering. So a shudder suddenly ran through the heart of Diti, the mother of Hiranyaksha. She recalled the words of her husband Kasyapa, and blood flowed from her breasts. Verse 24. When the demon saw his magic forces dispelled, he once again came into the presence of the personality of Godhead Keshava, and full of rage, tried to embrace him within his arms to crush him. But to his great amazement, he found the Lord standing outside the circle of his arms. Verse 25. The demon now began to strike the Lord with his hard fists, but Lord Adhoksija slapped him in the root of the ear, just here. Even as Indra, the lord of the Maruts, hit the demon Vritra, so he slapped him at the root of the ear. 26. Though struck indifferently by the Lord, the conqueror of all, the demon's body began to wheel, began to spin. His eyeballs bulge out of their sockets, his arms and legs broken, and the hair on his head scattered. He fell down dead, like a gigantic tree uprooted by the wind. So there you go, devotees. That's all the verses from verse 1 to verse 26. And now we're going to go through again and read the purports as well as the verses. But as I was looking through, I noticed that there are not many purports. There's a few purports, but definitely less than half the verses in this section have purports. So I won't just read through all the verses again, all 26 of them. But what I'll do is I will read the verses which have purports and then go through the purports. And in between, I'll just fill in a little of the story. So verse 1. So, and the subject matter, of course, from verse 1 to verse 26 is Lord Varaha kills Hiranyaksha. So verse 1, Sri Maitreya said, after hearing the words of Brahma, the Creator, which were free from all sinful purposes and as sweet as nectar, the Lord heartily laughed and accepted his prayer with a glance laden with love. Yeah, so it's very interesting. These transcendental communications are very deep. So Lord Brahma, he had just right at the end of chapter 18, he had appealed to Lord Varaha to just kill Hiranyaksha, just kill him now, before it gets late, because he'll become empowered further when it's dark or getting dark. So his words from the end of the last chapter, chapter 18, the verse says, they were free from all sinful purposes and as sweet as nectar. And then the Lord heartily laughed and accepted Brahma's prayer with a glance laden with love. Right, okay. Let's go through the purport here to verse 1. So, of course, the first point is, well, Prabhupada focuses the word nirvyalika. Nirvyalika means free from all sinful purposes. And Prabhupada says the prayers of the demigods, or just of the devotees, of any devotees, sincere devotees, are definitely free from sinful purposes. Yes. And therefore they're very sweet. They're very nice. They're very beautiful words. But the prayers of the demons, they're always filled with sinful purposes. The prayers of the devotees are free from sinful purposes, but the prayers of the demons are always filled with sinful purposes. For example, Hiranyaksha became powerful by the boon of Brahma, and after that he created disturbances, even to Brahma. So he created great disturbances because of his sinful intents. Yes, sinful intents, they always mean abusive, exploitative, and aggressive. So they're not nice. So Hiranyaksha, he became powerful by the boon of Brahma, and after that he created great disturbances because of his sinful intents. Whereas the prayers of Lord Brahma and the other devotee demigods were just to please the Lord. So hearing those prayers, Lord Varaha smiled and accepted their prayer to kill the demon, because they were in anxiety. If you remember, I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the demigods, Lord Brahma was in anxiety that if the Lord waits any longer, then the night is going to start coming. And when the night starts coming, then the demons become more powerful. Yeah. So Lord Varaha smiled and accepted that prayer and just got ready to just kill the demon very soon. Not right now, but very, very soon. So the demons, Prabhupada makes the point, the demons are never interested in praising the Lord, because they don't know anything about him. Rather, they worship demigods to get material things. And of course, this is condemned in Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna says, people who do that, they have alpamedasa, very little intelligence. And actually, Prabhupada says here, people who worship the demigods have no intelligence. But so therefore the demons, it's considered that the demons have lost all their intelligence. And how did that happen? Because they don't know what is their self-interest. And rather they think that certain or different things which are not in their self-interest, actually, they think they are in their self-interest. And even if they have information about the Lord, they won't approach him. So they can't get their desired boons, the results they want from the demigods. They can't get them because their purposes are always sinful. And Prabhupada mentions, it's interesting, it is said that the dacoits in Bengal used to worship the goddess Kali for fulfillment of their sinful desires, to plunder others' property. Yes, so they would worship Kali, but they never went to Vishnu temples. They never went to temples of Vishnu or Lord Krishna. And why? Because they felt they might have been unsuccessful in their missions of plundering others' property if they prayed to Vishnu. Right. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, therefore the prayers of the demigods or the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are always untinged by sinful purposes. Right. So now, devotees, there's a whole series of verses in which the Lord is fighting with Hiranyaksha. And we already read through them all. So let's move on till we find a verse with a purport. And here we have one. It's verse 14. So basically up till now, the battle has just been going on. Different weapons and smashing and bashing. And now what's happening? Verse 14, Hiranyaksha has just taken a trident, like a spear with 3 sharp points on the end, and he's going to hurl it at Lord Varaha. So verse 14, hurled by the mighty demon with all his strength, The flying trident shone brightly in the sky. The personality of Godhead, however, tore it to pieces with his discus, Sudarshan, which had a sharp-edged rim, even as Indra cut off a wing of Garuda. So from verse 1 to this verse, it's just been descriptions of the battle and the weapons and hitting each other and all that sort of thing. So now there's a story actually behind this incident of Indra cutting off a wing of Garuda. Prabhupada tells the story in the purport, so let us just repeat it. So the thing is, once Garuda, who's the bird carrier of Lord Vishnu, he snatched away a nectar pot from the hands of the demigods in order to liberate his mother, Vinata, from the clutches of his stepmother, Kadru, who is the mother of the serpents. So then, on learning of this, Indra, the king of heaven, hurled his thunderbolt against Garuda. Right, and then, to respect the infallibility of Indra's weapon, Garuda, although invincible, being the Lord's own mount, dropped one of his wings, which was shattered to pieces by the thunderbolt. Okay, so we've got just a couple more sentences. Let's just read through them. Inhabitants of higher planets are so sensible that even in fighting, they observe rules and regulations of gentleness. Yes, gentleness, or like culturedness, like we read when the Lord dropped his club, Hiranyaksha stood back and let the Lord sort of recover himself and his position. So that's part of rules and regulations of gentleness. Gentleness does not mean, of course, that when I hit you with my club, I will hit you gently. No, it just means being a gentleman and observing certain rules and regulations and not just fighting wildly like a madman. So Prabhupada then concludes the purport by saying, in this case, Garuda wanted to show respect for Indra, since he knew that Indra's weapon must destroy something. So he offered his wing. Right, okay, now there's a few verses now which have purports, 15, 16, and 17. 15, the demon was enraged when his trident was cut to pieces by the discus of the personality of Godhead. He therefore advanced towards the Lord and, roaring aloud, struck his hard fist against the Lord's broad chest, which bore the mark of Srivatsa. Then he went out of sight. So Srivatsa, as you probably know, devotees, in Vaikuntha, all the men, basically all the men, or the great majority, they look just like Lord Narayan. So how to distinguish Lord Narayan from the rest of the men? Well, that's because, you can do that because the Lord has Srivatsa. Prabhupada describes it here as a curl of white hair on the chest of the Lord. Just somewhere on the chest, there's this curl of white hair, Srivatsa, And when people see that, they know, aha, this is Lord Narayan. But when they see the other men, then they don't see that mark of Srivatsa, and they know that's just, these are other devotees. So, okay, so that's the purport there. Then verse 16, hit in this manner by the demon O Vidura, the Lord who had appeared as the first boar did not feel the least quaking in any part of his body, any more than an elephant would when struck with a wreath of flowers. So anyway, Srila Prabhupada gives some explanation. It's a short purport. First thing is, as we know, previously explained, actually Hiranyaksha was originally a servitor of the Lord in Vaikuntha, but somehow he fell to become a demon. And his fighting with the Lord is understood to be for his correction and improvement, and to help him go back to Godhead. So the Lord, when the Lord was hit, he enjoyed it, like a father may take pleasure in a mock fight with his son. So, of course, the verse makes it clear that even though Hiranyaksha really tried to hit the Lord and really disturb him, or he'd like to kill him actually, but for the Lord it felt like being hit by a garland. It's just nothing, it's playful. So he felt Hiranyaksha's blow to be like flowers offered for his worship. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in other words, the Lord desired to fight in order to enjoy his transcendental bliss. Therefore, he enjoyed the attack. And verse 17 has a purport also. This is the verse. The demon, however, employed many conjuring tricks against the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of Yoga Maya. At the sight of this, the people were filled with alarm and thought that the dissolution of the universe was near. Okay, so, yes, short, very short purport. Prabhupada explains, as he's done before, that the fighting spirit of the Lord, enjoying fighting with his devotee, who had become converted into a demon, it seemed very severe, the fight. They're just bashing each other and smashing each other. And it seemed like it'd shake the universe to pieces. But Prabhupada says, this is the greatness of the Supreme Lord. Even the wavering of his little finger appears to be a great and very dangerous movement in the eyes of the inhabitants of the universe. So, devotees, we carry on to verse 22, skipping 5 verses or so. Verse 22. So the battle has been going on, but now the Lord has decided, right, that's it, had enough. Now I'm going to kill him. So verse 22 says, the Lord, the personal enjoyer of all sacrifices, now discharged his beloved Sudarshan, which was capable of dispersing the magical forces displayed by the demon. Okay, so let's have a look at the purport. So Prabhupada makes the point, first of all, that even famous yogis or even famous demons sometimes do great magical feats. But in the presence of the Sudarshan chakra, when it's released, when the chakra is released, while all these magical feats are going on from the yogis or even demons, so all that magic is dispersed. An example, very good example, Devasa Muni and Ambarish Maharaj, that's the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam. If you're not familiar with the story, it's just an amazing story. So anyway, Devasa, it's a long story, Devasa wanted to show some magic, but when the Sudarshan chakra came of the Lord, from the Lord, then Devasa fled, afraid for his personal protection. So then Srila Prabhupada explains the Lord is the enjoyer of 3 kinds of yajna. And Bhagavad Gita explains this, that there are 3 kinds of yajna. That one is the sacrifice. Yajna, of course, means sacrifice. First of all, sacrifice of goods. Secondly, sacrifice of meditation. And then sacrifices of philosophical speculation. So anyway, those on the path of karma, jnana, and yoga have in the end to come to the Lord, because Vasudeva Sarvamiti, that's Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 verse 9, he's the ultimate enjoyer of everything. That is the perfection of all sacrifice. So we carry on, because verse 23 also has some purport. Right, so verse 23, at that very moment, a shudder suddenly ran through the heart of Diti, the mother of Hiranyaksha. She recalled the words of her husband Kasyapa, and blood flowed from her breasts. So, just at Hiranyaksha's last moment, is just about to, get slapped, his mother Diti remembered him, and remembered particularly what Kasyapa had said, that although her sons would be demons, they would have the advantage of being killed by the Lord. So it's just about to happen with the first of the sons. So now she remembered this, Diti remembered this, and instead of milk coming from her breast, blood flowed from her breast. Often we find that when the mother is moved by love for her sons, then milk flows from her breasts. So, but in this case here, the blood couldn't transform into milk, because that's what milk is. Milk is transformed blood of the cow. And of course, Prabhupada makes the point, to drink milk is auspicious, but to drink blood is not, although they're one and the same thing. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, this formula is applicable in the case of cow's milk also, as we just mentioned. So, okay, verse 24, and here's another verse with a purport. When the demon saw his magic forces dispelled, he once again came into the presence of the personality of Godhead Keshava, and full of rage, tried to embrace him within his arms to crush him. But to his great amazement, he found the Lord standing outside the circle of his arms. Okay, so let's go into the purport here. So in this verse, the Lord is addressed as Keshava because he killed the Keshi demon in the beginning of creation. Keshava is also a name of Krishna. It means he who has beautiful blackish hair. Yeah, so Krishna then is the origin of all incarnations. And Prabhupada says the demon tried to measure the Lord by embracing him. And he thought he could capture the Lord by material power. Got you. But he didn't know that the Lord is the greatest of the great and the smallest of the small. So no one can capture him or bring him under their control. But of course, demons, being demons, always try to measure the length and breadth of the Lord. But by his inconceivable potency, the Lord can become the universal form and at the same time remain in a box of his devotee as a deity. So the Lord is not bound by any measurement of our calculation. He can remain with his devotee in any suitable form, but he is unapproachable by any amount of demoniac activities. You've got no chance. Verse 25. The demon now began to strike the Lord with his hard fists, but Lord Adhokshaja slapped him in the root of the ear, even as Indra, the lord of the Maruts, hit the demon Vritra. So there's another one of these really short purports, 2 sentences. Let me just read it. The Lord is explained here to be Adhokshaja, beyond the reach of all material calculation. Akshaja means the measurement of our senses, and Adhokshaja means that which is beyond the measurement of our senses. Okay, and verse 26. Although struck indifferently by the Lord, the conqueror of all, the demon's body began to wheel, he began to spin. His eyeballs bulged out of their sockets, his arms and legs broken, and the hair on his head scattered. He fell down dead like a gigantic tree uprooted by the wind. So there's a purport. Prabhupada begins by saying, it doesn't take the Lord a moment to appreciate and to kill any powerful demon, including Hiranyaksha. So he could have killed him long before, but he wanted to let the demon display his magical powers. And this is to show us, among other things, it's definitely to show us that we should know that by magic, by scientific knowledge, or material power, one can't become equal to the Lord. And Prabhupada says, his one signal is sufficient to destroy all our attempts. What do you think of that? His power is so strong that the demon, despite all his maneuvers, was killed by him when he, the Lord, destined it to happen, and he was killed with one slap. So let's have a look here, yeah. We've got now the second section from verse 27 to verse 30, and there's not so many verses, so we'll just read through it. There's just one main purport. So 27, Ajah, Brahma, and others arrived on the scene, on the spot, to see the fearfully tusked demon lying on the ground biting his lip. The glow of his face was yet unfaded, and Brahma admiringly said, "Oh, who could meet such a blessed death?" So this was very unusual, actually, because when a person or an animal dies, the body immediately becomes pale and decomposition starts. But sometimes I've seen with devotees, they look just the same, like Shamlal Prabhu. The day after he passed away, he looked just exactly the same. But other times I've seen people who I knew who were, generally they are sort of devotees, but they weren't very serious devotees, and I could hardly recognize them the day after they passed away. So, but here his luster was unfaded because the Lord was touching his body. So the luster, Prabhupada explains, the luster, some effulgence, is there while the soul is there in the body, but now the soul was not there. So therefore the Supreme Soul, when the Supreme Soul touched his body, his luster didn't fade. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, one who sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead when he quits his body is certainly very fortunate, and therefore personalities like Brahma and the other demigods are eulogized, they eulogized the death of the demon. And on to verse 28, which also has a purport. 28. Brahma continued, he was struck by a forefoot of the Lord, whom yogis, seeking freedom from their unreal material bodies, meditate upon in seclusion in mystic trance. While gazing on his countenance, the crest jewel of deity's sons has cast off his mortal coil. Mortal coil just means his body. Right, so there's a purport here. Let's have a look. Prabhupada says the process of yoga is clearly described in this verse. And what is that process? Well, Prabhupada explains the ultimate end of yoga, meditation of yogis and mystics, is to get rid of the material body. So what these yogis do, what people normally do when they're practicing yoga, is they meditate in secluded places to attain samadhi. And Prabhupada says that this form of yoga has to be done in a secluded place, not in public, and not in demonstrations on a stage. Because yoga is for getting rid of the material body, not for keeping the body fit. Yes. So the advertisements of the yogis, some of them, they advertise specifically that you can keep fit, do yoga and keep fit. But anyway, Prabhupada mentions that as Bhagavad Gita confirms, anyone who focuses the mind on the Lord in any form is a first-class yogi, and he can easily attain samadhi. So if one does that at the time of death, one is liberated from the body and goes back to Godhead. So the demon, Hiranyaksha, got this chance from the Lord. So Lord Brahma and the demigods were astonished. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in other words, the perfection of yoga practice can be attained by a demon also, if he is simply kicked by the Lord. Ah, Krishna. Okay, so verse 30. The demigods addressed the Lord. All obeisances unto you. You are the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and you have assumed the form of a boar in pure goodness for the purpose of maintaining the world. Fortunately for us, this demon, who was a torment to the worlds, has been slain by you, and we too, O Lord, are now at ease in devotion to your lotus feet. There is a purport here. Let's go through it. In the material world, there are the three modes of material nature, of course: goodness, passion, and ignorance. But in the spiritual world, there's only pure goodness. You know, it's explained in Bhagavad Gita, and it's already been explained fairly regularly through the Bhagavatam, just as far as we've got now into the third canto, that the mode of goodness in the material world is always mixed with passion and ignorance. So you never find just goodness. And you never find just passion, and you never find just ignorance. The modes in the material world, they're always mixed. They always mix. But in the spiritual world, there's only one mode, and that is called Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness. Yeah. And it means simply transcendental, eternal, fully conscious, blissful goodness. Without any presence at all of passion or ignorance. So the Lord's form is like that, pure goodness. It's not material. But in this material world, there's no pure goodness. So another term in the Bhagavatam, another term for pure goodness is Sattvam Vishuddham. Vishuddham means pure. Now, yes, of course, that's correct. Vishuddham means pure. But Vishuddham, if we look at it a little more deeply, we understand that Shuddham, just Shuddham, means pure. So Vishuddham means very pure. Very, very pure. Yes. Just like it's said in Bhagavad Gita, Paritranaya Saudinam Vinashaya Chaduskritam. Chapter 4, verse 8. When the Lord comes, then Paritranaya Saudinam, he protects the devotees, but then Vinashaya Chaduskritam, the demons, he destroys. Nash means destroy. But now here we hear Vinash. Vi is a, a prefix. Vi, or Vi, is a prefix of emphasis. Very. So he very destroys, vinash, he very destroys the demons. And this pure goodness here in the spiritual world, sattvam vishuddham, it is absolutely the ultimate pure goodness. And there's just no passion or ignorance at all. So therefore Lord Varaha is not from the material world. And the same, of course, applies to any form of the Lord, all the forms of the Lord, because none of them belong to the material qualities, none of them have material qualities. Right, yes, so Varaha is not from the material world. So, right, there's a second paragraph here in the purport. Vishnu is the enjoyer of sacrifices, of all sacrifices. All Vedic sacrifices are meant to please him. But out of ignorance, out of ignorance, people try to satisfy others, not just Lord Vishnu. They try to satisfy demigods. They try to satisfy themselves by performing yagyas, sacrifices, or just in whatever they do in life. But they should be trying to satisfy Vishnu. So those who know this nicely, are called demigods. They're also called just godly or almost God. And Srila Prabhupada makes the point that purified life is meant to please the Lord. And all sacrifices performed in purified life are called Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport of verse 30 by saying, this Krishna consciousness is developed by devotional service, as clearly mentioned here. Now, devotees, there's only another 6 verses, but some of them have big purports, so we'll carry on with them tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.